Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Polytalks Environmental Politics. In today's episode, we'll be stepping back a little from the big picture national issues that I've covered over the last few episodes and actually pivoting to a more specific and perhaps more obscure form of environmental policy that still has major impacts for the environment and especially for the inhabitants of U.S. states in the West especially. So what exactly is this? Well, in today's episode, we're going to be covering the recent spate of wildlife bridges and tunnels that allow wildlife, so species like elk, deer, coyotes, etc., to actually cross over busy highways, which of course is designed to reduce or even eliminate the risk of collision, ensure that animals can cross safely, and obviously save damage and delays, or prevent damage and delays on the major highways that would potentially result from these collisions. So ultimately, this project is not just a one-off. In fact, after the initial project in Colorado, we've actually seen a lot of offshoots in other states that are achieving the same purpose. And what I particularly want to focus on in today's episode is that those other initiatives in other states basically span political boundaries, right? So there's no single party or coalition or type of state that's advocating or constructing these bridges. Instead, it's a coalition of mostly Western states, right? Because that's where most of the wildlife near these major highways resides. That's where a lot of these efforts have been concentrated, and I want to offer this as a case study of the power of compromise and coalition building in environmental politics. So what exactly do these bridges look like? Well, in Colorado, it's pretty simple. There was this $15 million project to construct bridges across major highways, and that $15 million actually came from a mix of sources. Part of it was from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who provided a grant after the Southern Ute in Colorado actually pushed for such crossings, and the rest of the money came from a mix of public and private sources, including an undisclosed donor. So, of course, there's not a single well where all this funding's coming from. It does have to be scrapped together to some extent, but the fact that $15 million was procured despite the many competing political agendas in the state, I think that's a testament to just how popular and widely supported this policy is, right? And so you may be asking, like, why would politicians have an incentive to build these crossings? I mean, yes, it's obviously very sad to see gore on the side of highways when these animals are hit, but what impact does it actually have on the consumers, on the drivers? Of course, we've got to answer those practical questions like in any other environmental policy. And the answer in this case is simply that there is a major economic upside to building these overpasses, and the reason is pretty simple, which is just that when drivers collide with massive animals like deer or elk, it doesn't just damage the animals, although that's certainly one of the consequences, but it also leads to tangible material damages to the drivers and the cars themselves. And in many cases, these collisions actually result in injury or death to the driver, and also the immediate damages to the car and vehicles, and then also the secondary damages and loss in productivity that's caused by the blockages, closures, and delays that result from these collisions. So actually, an analysis by ecologists in the state of Colorado found that implementing these tunnels and overpasses and underpasses in the short term is a bit of a cost sink, of course, but in the long term actually pays itself off because of preventing all these damages. And so this is a great case study in an environmental policy that's both obviously positive for the environment, it's a net benefit for consumers, and can amass a wide variety of political support. And if you don't believe me, let's just take a look at some examples in other states. So I mentioned the Colorado overpass, but we also have one in the Conejo Valley in California. And of course, that is going to be a major, major project because if you know anything about LA, you know the roadways are very clogged, and this is only going to help alleviate some of that some of the pressure and the collisions in that area, and it's going to be a massive boon to the wildlife. If you just look at these pictures, you can clearly see that it's very plausible that there are many species living in these hills and they need a way to cross. And by the way, these species often end up crossing state boundaries and moving between states, so this is an issue that affects essentially the entire West Coast and Western United States. Again, there's another project with Highly 101, and that's also within Southern California. The main focus is mountain lions, although there are plenty of other species like bobcats, deers, etc. And then finally, there's an example within Idaho, actually, which is a very deep red state, and yet they are constructing a bridge which will help preserve the Silver Valley elk. And as you can see, there's no immediate political incentive for this project, but actually, this is an example of how conservationism, when done right, can actually succeed in a wide variety of contexts. And so the unfortunate reality is not every environmental policy is going to be quite this clear-cut, but hopefully this can serve as an example and a case study for future successes within the environmental policy realm. And also, it's just a simple example of how one state's actions, in this case Colorado, can actually end up setting off a ripple effect and allowing other states to take inspiration from that project and essentially implement low-hanging fruit. It always helps if there's at least one state who led an initiative, because then other states can borrow from the examples, the struggles, the setbacks to better design their own policies. So I thought this was an interesting little foray into local environmental politics, and I certainly hope to see you in the next episode, where we're probably going to return to a bit more of an international or national theme with something like rare earth minerals or artificial intelligence. So I hope I see you then, but this was a fun episode, and have a great day.